Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Hey Man, It's Okay, a men's mental health podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sky Bridges.
And I'm your other host, Ryan Heapy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist out of Newport Beach, California. Although my opinions here are not in any way a reflection of any of my clinical expertise or clinical work done in the office. And these are just my opinions only. Although my study of psychology over the past 10, 12 years definitely informs some of what I talk about here. And it's such a blessing to be here and be able to talk about men's mental health with you guys.
Awesome. Well, you guys, I'm pretty excited about today's episode because we have somebody on who this year has really made such a difference in my life, and it changed my entire career path. Learning about myself through the Enneagram. We have my teacher, Joel Hubbard of The Art of Growth, with us this morning. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on because the Enneagram has really made such a difference for me in my life, not just in my personal life, but also in my professional life. I've talked with the listeners before about how the Enneagram has affected my personal life, but I've never really gone into the professional aspect of it. And I'm really excited to have you on because you have such an insight into what the Enneagram is and what it stands for. So I'm hoping you can tell us and the listeners a little bit about yourself, and also let's talk obviously a lot about the Enneagram.
Okay. Well, that's the most boring part, is talking about myself. So I'll see if I can make it quick here. So I grew up in the New England area, just north of Boston, and been here all my life. Did some all kinds of stuff at first in the corporate. I did some sales in corporate, and then eventually I became a full-time youth pastor and went to seminary, became a lead pastor of a church, burned out. And my wife, who was just hugely supportive, and my young son at the time could see something wrong with dad and something wrong with my husband here. He's not the same guy. And through the burnout, I discovered, and can't even tell you how I found the Enneagram. It seems like a lot of stories are similar. It's like, I don't know, something is like the Enneagram found me, it seems. So that was my story as well. And I stumbled onto a book, maybe it was, or something, but it led me to doing a deep dive. And at the time, I perceived that my problems were external to me. They were circumstantial. It was people. It was the institution of the church I was frustrated with and annoyed with. And it was the rigidity of doctrines and creeds and all that. That was the problem. But as I did my work, as I started looking more deeply at the Enneagram, it made me confront who I am, made me confront what my part. And so when I saw that, it's both a real humbling moment and yeah, it kind of pisses you off a little bit, like it's me. And then at the same time, it's so empowering. Like, oh, I can do something about this. Right. So so as I did, people started noticing some change. And typically, as my personality type, I tend to tell everybody everything I'm into. But I felt like I wasn't supposed to. It was just sort of the thing of like, don't tell anybody, just do the work. And I heard, I think some comedian or something say something like, change or transformation should be like a haircut. You don't need to tell people about it. It's like, if it's there, if it's happening, everybody will see it.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
just such a relief to I couldn't cheer loudly enough for that. Like, so good. So good. Yes. So I shut him off and let the work do its job on me. And people started saying, geez, you're really a lot happier. You're a lot more peaceful. And so in 2017, and I asked my wife, hey, what do you think? Should I I feel like I'm supposed to get certified in this thing. And he's like, sure, I believe that's the case. And luckily things have worked out and I was able to pivot and do this full time. So I am absolutely thrilled to be doing something that is of the love of my heart, something that's fits who I am really well. And so that's my story.
So in many ways, you would say this transformation, instead of kind of blame and pointing to the injustices of the world, the Enneagram sort of gave you agency, a feeling of being more empowered. And for those who don't know what agency is like the belief that we have power and control over the outcomes of our lives, basically. Well, that can be emotional, that can be physical, tangible. And so it sort of sounds like it put the control back into your hands.
Yeah, and I mean, there's plenty, and I can listen to I can almost hear some of your listeners and followers say, "Well, there's a lot of things you can't control." Absolutely, there's a lot of things you can't control, and that's the part that we're just wacky people. We think we can control things we absolutely can't control, but we take no responsibility for the things that we can control. That's an exaggeration, but that's kind of what happens in our lives. And I think the Enneagram flips that around. This is like, look, you have zero control over other people, but and sometimes and there are circumstances and things that happen to you, you have no control over how that happened. But like good old Epictetus, Stoic philosopher said, it's how you respond to those things, right? That gives you that's where the agency is. And then you don't turn your struggle into eternal suffering. I think that's part of the problem is like we live out of narratives from the past of like, well, that happened to me, and the suffering just continues, right? It's like we give ourselves a pass, we play victim, and I'm pretty good at it in the areas of my life that I want to play victim in, and but it's the Enneagram just confronts you with it. Like, yeah, you can continue to play victim. How's that working out for you though? You hate it. Life sucks for you, and everybody around you is miserable. So, you have the power to create a better atmosphere. That's what I'm convinced of. And you can bring that atmosphere wherever you go. And be a light instead of, adding more darkness to the world.
I'm sure you're familiar with Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if anybody out there, one of the greatest books ever written.
Absolutely.
But there was something he wrote in there that like the last of our human freedoms is our freedom to choose our own attitude in any given set of circumstances. That for
so good. Such a great quote. Such a great quote. Yes. That space between. He's the one that said that. So everybody uses that. And nowadays, it's a space between what is it? Stimulus and response. And in that space is your power to choose. Right. So like, so good.
Yeah.
And here he is, and people could be like, oh yeah, well, he's just a therapist or psychologist. Oh yeah, he's a survivor in Nazi Germany. So,
Yeah.
He was in the concentration camps. And so if anybody can speak to the power to have that agency, right, over how you respond, it'd be someone like him.
Yeah, nobody's seen suffering quite like probably Viktor
God.
Frankl. Yeah. So you guys, Sky, you guys have had a pretty special journey together, I think.
Yeah, I definitely say that's the case. Joel, I mean, he helped correct me on a couple of things I was thinking about the Enneagram and helped me to, well, first of all, I have my certification in the Enneagram now, thanks to Joel and the Art of Growth, which I've been so happy and felt so blessed to be able to help other people and help other people kind of figure out their journey. But yeah, I mean, Joel has been there this entire time to give me advice and to point out when my thinking might need to be. What I appreciated, Joel, is you didn't tell me I was wrong. You just told me, well, this is really hard and you just have to change the way you think about it and the way you approach it. And I really, really appreciated that. And anytime I try to make like decisions or when I'm thinking about the Enneagram, you definitely pop into my mind pretty regularly.
Good. Yeah. Well, it doesn't help people when you just point out like, you get a lot of, I recently heard a word I'm not familiar with ever, bloviating. It's like people who like say a lot of garbage, there's a lot of sort of, not necessarily garbage, but a lot of statements that are being made with like confidence, like you're wrong, you need to change. And so we get a lot of that comes at us. And I think sometimes we just need not that we are wrong, but what are some helpful things that we can do to begin to change? I'm all about that. Give me a tip. Give me some practice that I can engage in that, that really helps. And I think that's a better approach. And so grace, pace, nothing but that kind of a space for people. And See them as you see yourself. And when you do, you can extend that grace and, just kind of, hey, this seems to work for me, or have you considered this? And, and then leave it there.
Yeah, and I love that because I feel like I learned so much more that way because it helped me answer my questions myself. One of the biggest things you helped me with is realizing uh was it hunter, gatherer, or
Hunter, farmer, and teamer.
yeah, hunter, farmer, and teamer, and you helped me figure out which one I was, and because of that, it completely changed my career path because I was doing something where I thought I wanted to help the masses, and I just wanted to help as many people as possible. But going through the class, I realized that I like being more on the intimate level, more of a one-on-one type of interaction, and how much that really helps me. And so that made me question my career path. And I actually even got a promotion now because of the direction that I pushed myself in because of the motivation I got from this class.
That's awesome, dude. So good.
So, Sky, are you a teamer? I don't know kind of the definitions
Uh,
behind them, but I feel
yeah,
like you.
I think it's more of the hunter.
Oh, okay.
It's also called sexual, social, and self-preservation.
Mhm.
And I definitely lean towards the sexual. Sexual and social
That
are my top two.
and that kind of is. It's not necessarily sexual in the way that we would think of sexual, like
Correct.
sexuality. It's more like
Correct.
our id or our deep kind of drives for like passion. Is that
Yeah.
It's
Joel?
it's
Yeah,
a
you want to
passion.
correct
It
me?
is it does have, definitely has a lot more passion to it. It's the instinct, right? These are all instincts. So they're survival impulses that have been in the animal kingdom and among humans, for millions of years. And so what happens is these instincts have helped us to survive, and they all have uh, uh, different drives for different reasons. So if you have the instinct, this farmer instinct, or sometimes called self-preservation, that was really Freud's language to it, is you have an instinct to protect. It's a preserving and a sustaining instinct. So let's hold on to what we have. You can see this even among people who lean towards more towards a conservative bent, let's say. But it's not universal. Again, there are plenty of conservatives who have the other instincts, as well as liberals who have the opposite. So there's not a one for one. But that conserving energy is about protecting and preserving what we will already have, right? So that's the instinct. And then the hunter instinct is really more about, or the sexual instinct is like, it's propagation. Right? So how do we have to go hunt, right? We can't just
Create.
yeah, we got to create. We got to go get something, right? We got to go, and the moving and the need for change and the need for variety shows up. Now it's tempered or accentuated by the type. So different types, if you have a 7, well, it's accentuated. You get an 8, it's accentuated. But then if you have, say, a 9, it kind of works against the 9. The 9's it tends more towards like, pulling back energetically. So the sexual energy pushes you out. It's propagating energy. Go out, go find the woolly mammoth, take it back, kill it, bring it back. But it's also 1-to-1. It has this it's mating season, right? But again, people immediately think, well, is that about sex? No, it's not about sex necessarily. It does include that significantly for sure. It's not about that. It's about the exchange of energy, about this thing that happens between us, right? Because we're evolved. We're not just reptiles or mammals. We're a bit more evolved in that. So there's a lot more that shows up in that instinct. And then finally, the teamer or the social instinct is the one that thinks about the herd. So it's not about necessarily propagating. It's about surviving through groups and through a herd and through collaboration. So that's a collaborative kind of instinct. And that's how we're going to make it through the world, is through who we're connected to, our networks, right? So for the greater good, everything's about the greater good. That's how that instinct works.
Now, can I ask what number of your students come through? Like, what percentage would you say are male versus female?
Very small percentage are male. So by and large, I don't know what the percentage is, but quite a bit more are female that go through the certification. Yeah, I think that just goes to show how many more females are women are more interested, I think, um, in doing that internal work, it seems. I'm just observing this, than are men in general. But what I believe about men is that in safe environments, they open up, and they open up just as deeply as do women. But it's just difficult because men are a bit more guarded when it comes to that inner space. So, I'm sure there's a much smarter
I f
people that can
I find
explain.
that that rings true. Yeah, I find that that rings true with a lot of things related to mental health, is it's the fields are primarily women more than men, so I appreciate all of us being here and being the rarity and being willing to have the open and honest conversations, because I'll tell you what, I've had more honest conversations with my friends going into their Enneagram than I ever did with anybody else and in any other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder if that's, because men are, whether this is from an evolution perspective, a biological, a hormonal, if it's testosterone or societal or messaging, I think all of those play a factor, and they're probably all very intertwined. Of how we kind of have to be tough and showing any sort of vulnerability, whether that is to a man or a woman, you can be perceived as weak, and lose, your positions, or you lose status, or
Yeah.
those things can be weaponized against you,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately, as well. And so, I think for a lot of men, it has to be in a very safe space before, we can kind of shed or show some of those weaknesses.
Yeah, for sure.
But it also seems like the Enneagram almost gives a very non-judgmental framework of looking at those strengths and weaknesses. That there isn't a positive in the strength, and there isn't necessarily a negative in the weakness. It's just
Right.
kind of, this is the dynamic that we operate in, and therefore this is how we can grow, or increase one aspect of it or decrease another aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
How does the Enneagram and learning your type and the accentuations, I think of them, how
The
does
instincts?
the instincts, yeah, how do those play a role in our relationships?
Yeah, it's tough to even start to answer that question, because it's more like that there's no other way that you do relationships other than through your type and through the instincts. There's no such thing as doing. It's like a fish who says, "Hey, geez, I think I might be in water." It's like, it takes a lot for you to know that. You have to be pulled out of the ocean to notice that you're in water. Um, so all of us are in water. All of us are in our type. We're in our instinct. We don't even know that there's anything other than what we are, until we start recognizing that there are other ways to view things. And so that's why, what we do is a lot of this for both the consumer side, but also for corporate side. We do, a lot of work at recognizing just how different others are in their thinking and their processing. But what it does is it gives you a momentary pause, as we're referring back to, Viktor Frankl. You get that pause, like, oh, right, this is my instinct, and I depersonalize it. And it's very important to do this. You can walk a fine line, sure, between, like, it's not me, it's my instinct, and that's kind of, the devil made me do it sort of thing. It's like putting it on something else as a way to not take responsibility. But that's not what we're
Correct. Yeah.
talking about here. We're talking about a
Well, justification.
depersonalization, because we can so identify. We're over-identified with our type. We're over-identified, so we can't even see it and change it. But once you can see it, then you can begin to make some better decisions about it. It's the awareness of, like, how much that's happening at any given time. I talk about this. I've said this many times in many different places. When I show up, when I come home, or when I'm usually home when I'm doing my work, but when I come upstairs from my office and I see my wife, I can have this sort of, still the engine's running, right? And when she starts talking to me, I can start to feel what I didn't know it was, but I could start to feel that engine and the sort of anxiety starting to pick up because we're talking about things that are just not interesting at the moment to me. Because my type has an area of interest, and my instinct definitely has an area of interest that is different than my wife's. And so at that moment, I can be like, come on, let's go. Or when we're watching something and she's holding the remote, and I want to grab it from her hand because she can't talk and fast forward through our recording at the same time. That drives me absolutely crazy. Like, let's go. I have to remind myself, this is not about the pace or the speed or getting to the thing that you want to get to immediately. This is about connection right now. You're not, and I have to talk myself. So I'm aware that's my type. I have to tell my type, you're not dying. My type thinks it's dying. When the remote is in her hand, my type, it feels like it's dying. When we're stuck in a conversation that is not, what I want to be talking about in the moment, I feel like I'm dying. I'm not dying. So I tell myself that. It's like, okay, tune back in to the connection between the two of us and just be present to that. Let yourself suffer. It's okay. You're not gonna, it's not gonna kill you. Suffer. And then she has to do some similar things coming from her side. As long as we're doing that, it's not perfect, but we're not in a place of moving ever more apart, which is what happens when we don't pay attention to our types. This is why we have such a divided world. Like, think about loneliness and the epidemic of loneliness.
We've talked about that before, yeah.
What's the result? It's like, how could you be lonely and be surrounded by people? That's always to me the surprise. So I think for people to be like, I was lonely during 2020. Yes, a lot of people were. It was a horrible thing. But how can you be surrounded by your family, in school, university, college? You're surrounded by people and you're absolutely alone inside yourself. And that is an experience so many of us have, and increasingly have, because we're increasingly locking down on our types and on our personalities and our culture and everything that informs us, and we're locking down on it, and there's no the space between myself and other people is becoming wider and wider. And so I think that's a big part of the reason why. But if we were to begin to bridge that and do so deliberately, it's not immediately satisfying or gratifying. But when you walk away from that, how do you feel? And that's how I evaluate it. It's like, well, geez, I feel a lot happier. I feel a lot calmer. I feel a lot more. I don't feel the loneliness. It's not that I feel connected. That's a strange thing for me. I don't know if you relate to this. I don't feel connected. I just don't feel disconnected. I don't feel alone. I don't feel that
Suffering.
the suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is you're not dying a global kind of
Yes.
term that applies to that applies
Every
to
type.
all of the
Yes.
types?
Yes.
Because oh man, I mean that's so good. First people don't know this, but I think we did a podcast together, and I believe Joel and I have almost the exact same types.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of crazy because I also at 20, wanted to be a pastor. I was kind of being raised and trained to be a pastor, and there were some things that didn't jive well at all with me in that church. And now here we are, both in different still,
Still working with people.
helping, healing.
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that you're not dying, man, that resonated with me, because there had been moments where I had been in relationships where, as stupid as just pick a damn show,
Yeah.
I am dying
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. Yes. That's the way it
and
expresses
it's like
itself through you, the 7, very differently than it would. So just, for those who are listening, who are like, well, I don't have it that way. Well, no, it doesn't show up for you that way, but it shows up for 7s that way, but it shows up for every type in different ways. It's when your existential sense of dread starts to re-emerge, right? Our personality is designed to keep us from that. That's the reason why we have one. I mean, the entire thing is a sophisticated, brilliant system. Our ego is not stupid. It's smarter than you are and smarter than me. It is there, and it has managed to survive and thrive survive anyways, for a long time. So it's not going to be, it's not something to push away. It's something to recognize, like, it's protecting me from my existential dread. And so when you confront that, it's like, oof. And for sevens, it's anything that slows down, anything that stops when the pace
Wow.
is when there's nothing happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So you and Jim, your partner on Art of Growth, first of all, you have a podcast with Jim, and it's really amazing. And I actually have gotten to be on it before. But you guys treat a lot of not just like personal coaching, but you do a lot of corporate coaching as well. How do you find that the men are responding when you get further into your program? Because obviously this podcast is a men's mental health podcast, but we want to help everybody, but we always like to ask when we can get specific.
Yeah. So run that question again by me.
So in your corporate coaching and in your personal coaching, how do you find it best to connect with the males and to get them to open up to you? Because I find that's the hardest part when you're talking to your friends, your guy friends. It's just really hard to get anybody to open up.
Yeah.
And it feels like that you and Jim have kind of found a really good method of doing so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that I'm actually not entirely sure I know. I have some sense of my, if I think about my approach, I approach people roughly the same way that I would. I was about to say the way I want to be approached, but I also very much tailor it to different types and how they respond. And I read. So if I'm reading somebody's energy, somebody's disposition, and they're like definitely avoiding, they're pulling back, I'm not going to go charging in. Some people do. I don't. If someone's charging in, then I charge in back with them, and it's like, okay, that's what you like. But if I realize that, like, oh boy, you don't like me charging back in at you, so I'll just pull back again. So I think it's that practice, it's sort of like that dynamic between myself and other people. But I don't want to expose people, men or women. I don't want to expose them. I want them to feel like they can expose whatever's going on internally for them if they feel safe enough to do so. Otherwise, I don't go pressing in. I don't go digging. And I think for men in particular, that feels really safe. I think when we push too hard or push too aggressively, that can be really hard. But I think that that's important. I think challenge, men tend to respond well to challenge in general. But again, it's different types will have different ways that they will deal with challenge. Okay. So there's a lot that I think there's a lot of reasons why men are avoidant of this kind of kind of being confronted, because men experience this sense of incompetency. Women do too, but for men, the issue of competency, whether, again, I don't know, is this a socialized issue? Is this something that you're biologically this way? I don't know. But it does seem to me, and based on my readings, it's Warren Farrell's The Boy Crises. I mean, that book was kind of eye-opening. Some of this stuff, like, to feel like you cannot succeed in relationship to other people. For men, they shut down.
Crushing. No.
It's crushing. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to try very many times again, because that's just so painful to feel like you have no contribution and no value. Now, all types feel that. All humans feel that.
Yeah.
But it just seems accentuated in men. And I feel like men may be a bit more sensitive than women are.
Mhm.
Women deal with suffering, it seems, better. So, it's one of the things where, again, I'm super gentle with the heart with men, but more intense and challenging with the mind and with the body. Super like, like not gonna go charging in. We're gonna take our time. And sometimes they open up. I've had guys at the gym sitting next to me, tears in their eyes. Guys. So, tears in their eyes as they're opening up. And so I just create space, man. I don't do a whole lot of talking at that point. I'm talking a lot right now, but I don't do a whole lot of talking when I'm in that space with them. It's like, I get you, like,
Yeah. A lot of active listening.
yeah, it's like, I don't probe for my interests. I used to, and I could see what happens. People shut down when I probe for my interests. When I stay on there, choo-choo. So I really advocate this. Get on their train. Don't try to pull them back to yours. Not when they're opening up, not when they're starting, not when there's a crack. Stay on their train. And if they turn and shut it off and they move on and they're just like, all right, let's go. Okay, let's go.
You almost want to stay in that ultimate form of empathy, where you're really, and I think empathy is both deep connection, but also, really being able to articulate and understand where another person is coming from. No.
Yeah.
And I imagine the Enneagram almost gives you not only kind of, again, like a framework of having empathy, because you now understand that there are different types, there are different ways that people operate and move, and and so understanding those different types, you can much better understand where how somebody's feeling and kind of how they're going to respond next.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my favorite things that you said about the Enneagram, one of my favorite descriptions of it, like the most simplest way you can put it, is the Enneagram is a roadmap to growth, because it tells you why you do the things that you do. Like the first time I read my description, I wept, but it showed me how I can be better than I am now. And I think that that's so important for people out there listening. If you don't know your Enneagram number, guys, you can either book a session with Joel or Jim to type you, or they do have a free Enneagram test on their website, theartofgrowth.org. So make sure to check that out when you feel like you want to get a little deeper with yourself. Go ahead, Ryan.
Joel, why do you think, as a student of psychology who have minored in undergrad and other masters in clinical psychology and been working with people for a while, and I don't know, why do you think psychology has placed such an emphasis on things from Freud, from maybe Jung, from so many different modalities and theories, and not taken into, not integrated as much with the Enneagram, or when I think there's really something great to it, versus they've actually kind of integrated a bit with the Myers-Briggs a bit more,
Sure.
or the big 5 personality types. But it almost seems that the people I've met the Enneagram has resonated far more with them than anything maybe Freud talked about, or even the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are plenty of people I imagine right now in my mind. If I were to have that conversation with them, they'd contribute a world view of, a world of knowledge that I don't possess around some of the resistances that happen in the world of psychology, in the world of the sciences. I think in general, just sort of resistant to that which gets into that interpersonal, more into the heart center, I would say, because that's part of the thing that um, that feels too. Um, it's not measurable. It's a lot harder to really get at that. So there's resistances to that. It's like, well, we need proof, we need evidence, right? And so they're looking for the hard evidence. I think the other thing that is a problem is the general approach to how we have tried to categorize nearly everything as a human race. And that happens from a sort of meta view. It's like I'm above and I'm looking down, right? So I'm doing the analysis. I've sent out. I've done a large survey. 10,000 people or 5,000 people, or and we're serving, and so we're doing this kind of research, quantitative. I don't think you can get at that inner place that the Enneagram gets at through quantitative research. There are those who've tried, and there are those who are doing it, and would probably argue with me that you can. But what I find is that people will answer the questions based upon, Tuesday at 5 o'clock versus, say, Friday at 2 p.m. What was your week like? How did you show up? What was going on for you, right? So you're going to have some slightly different answers. It's also that we tend to lie to ourselves a lot. And so that's,
for sure.
I'm going to lie to the survey because I don't like the way even before my own self, I don't want to somehow, reveal some of this stuff. I think the qualitative rather, that gets more at the stuff that I catch people revealing themselves, right? And they catch themselves revealing themselves when they're disarmed. Otherwise, the ego is sophisticated and too intelligent, and it's going to keep blinding itself and trying to blind others as well. So I believe that that's a big part of the reason why. But I also have noticed, and we have a lot of therapists that have taken our course, that it's changing, and that people are recognizing that this doesn't really work that well. And when you go to a therapist for a decade, and this has been what we have heard so many times from clients of ours, and then they come and within 3 sessions, they're telling us, I have learned more. Sometimes within the first session, I've learned more from this one session than I have from 10 years of therapy. Now, in fairness, maybe the 10 years of therapy was necessary to get them to where they were able to then take the next step. So I want to put that out there because I'm not in any way against therapy. I believe in it. But I think that that's part of the thing is there's one size fits all in many of these sort of modalities. And there's a reason when I went for CBT, because I was dealing with a tremendous amount of anxiety. And the guy was very well respected. I mean, he came highly recommended, very intelligent individual, very good at what he did. But as he started giving me practices, I'm sitting there thinking I could have come up with these myself. They're not very great, but I could have come up with them myself. I'm a head type. It's not that difficult. And it didn't really, it took the edge a little bit off of the anxiety, but it didn't really do much more. Had he known the Enneagram, he would have said, no, we need to deal with your heart center because you're avoiding that. And then had I dealt with the heart center, because I've done that since, every time I deal with the heart center, the anxiety goes away. It's remarkable how that happens. It's remarkable how when I cry, a good deep cry, everything washes away and I feel very cleansed internally. Okay? CBT wouldn't have worked. That would never have worked for me. And then I talked to therapists who have been clients of mine who have said, no, it doesn't work for certain types. So very true. So I think it's part of it is just, yes, it's frustrating to me. Like, why isn't this everywhere? Why isn't it in universities to help students figure out who they are and where they want to go in this world? Right? It should be. So we do the work and we see tremendous transformation and changes. Sky, you figured out like this is the direction I should be going in rather than the direction I was going in. And look what happens. You get a raise, you get promoted. I mean, this is the stuff that, you wouldn't have known unless you saw yourself and were able to look at the instincts and go, well, I should probably be doing something more aligned with my instincts. Right. And it seems to
Yeah,
work well. So, yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, as soon as I found that out, and as soon as like we were in class talking about it, you said, why don't you give it a try and lean into it a little bit and see how it feels? And it felt great. So I knew right away that that was exactly what it was.
Nice.
And it was so eye-opening.
So cool.
And I will be the first to say, both, at times I probably haven't been entirely all that helpful to clients. And as a client, I have had, it's probably been 50-50, and I've probably had 20, 30 therapists, since I first started going to therapy at 12, 13 years old. And, some definitely not helpful, some very helpful, some harmful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really think there's a big portion of therapists out there right now that I don't know if it's for lack of energy or lack of tact and skill, just kind of validate people's suffering and experience, and that almost only further,
Oh, yeah.
I think increases their suffering. If you were, and I remember this when I was first training, that I would have clients come back to me time after time after time because I just kept validating how awful maybe their
Yeah.
spouse was, or
Yeah.
how awful their situation was.
Yeah.
Right. But now this guy or girl is getting professional validation and approval that they are in a terrible situation with a terrible person. And that's only making them go home
Oh,
and
yeah.
further feel like they're in an even worse situation than they were before they came to me. And I'm not giving them any skills or,
Yeah.
any perspectives or
Yeah.
anything different to give them agency and feel empowered to either
Yeah.
make change their view on the situation, or do something about it, So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's
good.
great.
So good. A big, there's two things that come to mind. One is even just like, I've said this to couples and I say this to my own wife. Everything's great. We've got issues to work on, but you know what? We get a good relationship. And when I approach it that way, it's a great thing. Now, yes, I'm a 7, so that would be more oriented to my type. But I can get in dark places very easily, and I can be like, "Oh, this is terrible. I hate this," and I can, it's the power of words, man. When you say something is awful, or yeah, your husband's awful, oh yeah, your wife is, and you support like that, you're absolutely right. You accentuate that. But to helping people and to actually having people want, that's the other thing is people have to want to be helped.
Yes, they do. They
Because
absolutely do.
because they will come and they will leave, and that was my experience many times as a pastor. Is people would come to me and would start to open up and share some problems, and then I would give them some ways that they could begin to take agency over their lives. And man, that was a mixed bag. I had people that thrived, but there were a very few percentage of people that would thrive. Other people just wouldn't come back. And some people got really mad at me. And it was like confusing. Like, why would you be mad? I didn't blame you. I just gave you a path forward. So anyhow, that's, people do have to want to, be ready to grow and want to grow. And
Yeah, you almost always, you have to have, for me, anybody, there's people out there, I will do, I won't do no cost with anyone because, and I will do low cost. You have to have some sort of skin and some sort of investment, I think, to want to do and want to create the change. And I feel like maybe, I imagine with people approaching you as a pastor, some of them, are hoping to just give their problems to God and and he can solve them.
Yeah,
And they'll just, without having to do any of the work themselves.
that's
And
right.
so,
Oh, yeah.
That's funny because that makes me think of the scripture that says
oh,
faith without works is dead.
ooh,
So when people say they pray to God and say,
yeah,
he hasn't given me anything, well, you got to work towards it too. You got to work in alignment with your higher power in order to get what you need.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a big shift too that people have to make. And it's so early faith, early stage faith is you do need God as the savior, God as the parent, right? Parents are saviors. Parents are archetypally that. They are the rescuers, the heroes, right? So you need that. And that's the external voice that tells you what's up, tells you what to do, tells you what not to do. So the rules are clear. The boundaries are clear. Uh, Otherwise, you're a pretty chaotic mess as a kid. And so that's the way that works. And so people come into the church world, if they come in, if they didn't grow up in it, they come into it, and that's oftentimes what they receive, and that may be helpful to them at the time. So it's like God says, and but then as you grow, that has to shift. And that's when it becomes the Christ in you, which is a bit less of this man in the sky, and it shifts to something that is more spirit-like, more of an internal sense of guide. And wow, do people not like that? It's a major shift. I didn't like it either, so I understand. But that's where now you're going to. I'm no longer the victim or the child in this situation. Now I've grown, and it should be internal to me now. And that's time for me to begin my hero's journey. It's time for me to begin to be, to leave that victimization, to leave my incapabilities, and to discover that I have more power, more agency than I ever imagined I did. And that's a shift that's very difficult. I remember my first client sat across from me at a little coffee shop, hole in the wall in a local city nearby here. And she said, I used to be able to, this is when I was pastoring. She said, I feel like God's not speaking to me the way God was speaking to me before. And then I looked at her and I said, maybe because it's time for you to start trusting your own inner voice.
Mm.
And she was like, stunned her, but she was a client that did want to grow. And she discovered the voice within, the Christ within. And we moved her out of that victimization where she was in to now taking charge and control of her life, and she's doing fantastic. And she's
That's awesome.
lots of challenges still, of course, everybody does, but she's no longer playing the victim. She is taking charge of her life. She's changed her life.
Become the warrior in her own story.
That's great. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important for growth to embrace that warrior inside you instead of just being the victim of the situation.
Yeah.
I think that really changes the way you approach it. It changes the way that you accept it, and that your even just like your body and your mind accept it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't face you can't forever stay in the same. That's the thing. That's the cruel thing of life. It forces you to grow. So you don't, you can fight it, and many do,
Yeah.
right? But the natural movement of life is growth. That's the natural result of living, right? As you grow. And so that's part of it, is like recognizing the different stages. And I think if we can help people to understand, like, all right, now maybe there's a little bit more agency you need to take in your life. Right? So you take a little bit more agency, and then the next time it's like, a few years down the road, okay, a little bit more agency. And that's the growth path, I think, for all of us.
I love that. Well, I know we're getting close to the end of our recording here, but I guess my last question to you, Joel, is what's next for the art of growth? What's on the horizon for you guys? You and Jim, it seems like things are going really well for you.
Yeah, we have got a lot of things that are next. We're trying to complete some of them. One of them is this book, Hunter Farmers Teamers, that we're almost complete with, and we're going to be publishing that soon. And that is primarily for companies to use through all kinds of things, including hiring and creating teams, and recognizing your own company's sort of instinctual drives and what it needs in order to succeed. And then also for big changes, and how the instincts help with managing change. So that's on the horizon. I can't wait to finally release that and be done with that, so we can move on. But I love it. Love the material. I love the book. We're gonna hopefully have that released soon in the next couple months. So that's what's next
Awesome.
for us.
Oh,
That's so exciting. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you? Tell us about your podcast, your website, and what kind of services you offer there?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to theartofgrowth.org, and there is everything from consumer stuff, so you can listen to podcasts there. Sign up for a newsletter where we don't write newsletters that are just adverts for something. We put content in there. We put our thoughts, our coaching tips right in the newsletter, and and of course there's links there for things like, hey, you want to sign up for, say, the certification course, which is starting again in January, and so they can do that. They can immediately start listening to the podcast. They can sign up for individual coaching. They can do the typing test, all sorts of things. And if you're interested in bringing this into your company, you can go to it's right there. You can go to the corporate page as well. So those are some options for you.
Awesome. Well, that's so exciting. So thanks to so much, Joel, for coming on today. This has been great. I'm so happy to see you again. Happy to have this conversation. And there's some other things that we want to talk to you about. So maybe we can get you on another time and talk about more of the spiritual side of the Enneagram. I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
yeah. Joel, the typing you did for me with Sky was one of the coolest sessions I've had, in any sort of healing therapeutic, I guess, modalities ever. And so,
Wow.
yeah, definitely very grateful to have you back on. And I really admire your work. I really admire your passion. I think you're one of the smartest and one of the most articulate people that we've had on here. And
Thank you.
Yeah. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you
It's
so
awesome.
much. That means a lot. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this episode of Hey Man, It's Okay. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, email us, let us know if there's any topics you want to hear. Check out our website, heymanitsokay.com. And you guys, from Sky, thanks again. And it's okay to not be okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.